with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, August 25th, 2021. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Cedar, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Karen Cox, author of No Common Ground, Confederate Monuments and the Ongoing Fight for Racial Justice. Meanwhile, Democrats have agreed to advance the $3.5 trillion budget resolution, allowing the House to begin writing that legislation, and also advanced the smaller package for a bipartisan vote with an arbitrary September 27th deadline to appease that mod squad. But House progressives have vowed to vote no on the bill if the larger package isn't yet agreed upon. The House also passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, a much less robust voting rights bill than H.R. 1, but it's DOA in the Senate because there's been no filibuster reform. Biden has stuck to his guns on the August 31st deadline to withdraw from Afghanistan and has said that over 70,000 people have been airlifted out of the country thus far. But not everyone's taking this withdrawal so well, including two congressmen, Democrat Seth Moulton and Republican Peter Meijer, who traveled to Afghanistan unauthorized in the middle of a dangerous evacuation as a political stunt. Both are veterans, and both critical of the withdrawal, and apparently the military personnel said that they were unwelcome and were a distraction. COVID cases in children have increased, and Sam is out still. He will be back on Monday. We have got a great show for you today. The House came to an agreement on the budget resolution yesterday afternoon. Essentially, the chum that was given to that mod squad of right-wing Democrats who are holding up the bill for a variety of reasons, but most publicly Josh Gottheimer is holding up the bill based on a tax benefit for wealthy households in blue states. And so the concession that they got was that there's a date set for September 27th for the bipartisan bill to be voted on. Now, a lot of people are saying that they're concerned that that the September 27th deadline is not enough time for the bipartisan bill to be agreed upon and the framework to come together. Now, that is a fair critique, and that doesn't necessarily matter, though, because the progressives say that they're going to vote no on the bipartisan bill if that framework isn't agreed to yet. So the deadline's entirely arbitrary. Pelosi gave it to the mod squad, as they like to be called, as a way to essentially get them off her back and move this process forward. We'll see how that pans out. But let's quickly turn to South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, fresh off of his COVID diagnosis and his quarantine, made an appearance on Sean Hannity's program last night. He and John McCain, they used to double team this kind of talk, both inevitably reaching the conclusion that more aggression, more war, more bloodshed was necessary no matter what. So in McCain's absence, now that he has passed away, it seems that Graham has to ratchet things up to do double the work, with an assist by Sean Hannity.
time.
Senator,
you know,
we impeached Donald Trump over a phone call with Ukraine. Is that not an impeachable offense? Is this not rise to the level of dereliction of duty, abandoning Americans in a foreign country, not getting them out when you had control of Kabul in May, June, July, not doing the right thing, getting them out, knowing they're on the march? There's no consequences for that except politically?
He should be impeached. This is dereliction of duty by the commander-in-chief. This makes it harder to fight future wars.
Good. My answer is it makes it harder to fight future wars. I'm fine with that. Maybe that'll give us some pause in terms of invading the next country for our own imperialist purposes. So now we're just throwing around impeachment for standard policy decisions. Let's just start with what Sean Hannity said, just calling what happened with Trump just a phone call. Like, doesn't the substance of a phone call matter, right? A phone call can be, you know, I'm calling grandma to see if she's doing all right. And then a phone call can be, I call up Matt and say, hey, put a hit on Bradley. I'll pay you $50,000 to make sure he sleeps with the fishes, right? That's a little bit substantively different than the first example. The Trump call was the result of a whistleblower revealing that Trump had blocked hundreds of millions of dollars in assistance that was congressionally mandated, that was supposed to go to Ukraine unless they gave him dirt on Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, his potential political opponent. A bit different than just, you know, giving Zelensky a ring to say, what's up, dude? How you doing? And in terms of Biden being impeached for a standard decision about war, when he committed no crimes here. In fact, I believe he did the just thing and the right thing. And well, I mean, there are no good options in this kind of situation, given what the United States has created. But this was the only option that didn't involve a further occupation and endless involvement in a conflict that we should not be involved in.
Yeah, the occupation was a dishonorable crime, and the idea that you would have a good withdrawal from it, it's like a whole bunch of bank robbers, or like one set of bank robbers saying we should investigate part of their team that they're turning on for traffic violations in the getaway car.
Yeah.
Right? Like, no, we should be investigating this entire decision to go and waste a whole bunch of lives and money in a place that for no conceivable purpose, and this was known for a decade at least.
It's just like the sunk cost fallacy, and yet they're just it's infected everybody. Like, everybody is convinced of this. It's not just something that you can point to, and it's completely made the rotted people's brains. Although Graham's brain in this area has been rotted for a while. Like, so he's saying Biden should be impeached for disengaging from Afghanistan. What's insane to me is that war crimes are considered lawfulness by Lindsey Graham, and backing down from a war is actually the crime. Orwellian is overused all the time, but I'm pretty sure war is peace, kind of exemplified by Graham's ideology here. He was cheerleading the Bush administration when they oversaw an illegal torture regime, and they murdered countless innocent people in an illegal war that was illegal from its outset. In the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war, it's a whole nother debacle. But he had a partisan option to critique Obama's drone war, which killed an American citizen, Anwar al-Awlaki, and his son. Nowhere to be found, Lindsey Graham there. He was, of course, nowhere to be found when Trump, who he originally said would be the death from war, that's the real crime in the minds of deranged folks like Sean Hannity and Lindsey Graham. And it's just, it's a mental, like, warping that I cannot truly understand. But Graham's been consistent on it. This is who he is, and it's who he's been for quite a long time. And unfortunately, this guy's got a lot of power, and he's in our government. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we will be joined by Karen Cox, author of No Common Ground, Confederate Monuments, and the Ongoing Fight for Racial Justice.
Bye, folks. As you know, as Emma knows, summer's here, and the living ain't easy if you have, say it with me, Emma, swamp ass. How are you going to stay on top of your sweaty bottom? Well, try a refreshing spray from a Hello Tushy bidet. You're going to keep yourself clean and fresh all summer long with the brand new Hello Tushy 3.0 modern bidet attachment. We have spoken at length about the Hello Tushy bidet. I became bidet curious during COVID, and I have not looked back. Thank you. My own pun. It is stylish. It is eco-friendly. It is easy to install, and it saves you cheap-ass money. Hello Tushy 3.0 doesn't just clean out your butt with a precise stream of fresh water. It cleans itself. It's got this smart spray automatic nozzle. And look, it attaches to your existing toilet. It's super easy. You lift up the seat, you slide it in, you put the seat back on. No electricity, no extra plumbing is needed. You know, you cut your toilet paper use by about 80%. It pays for itself in a few months because it is incredibly reasonably priced. Plus, the Hello Tushy has your ass covered with a 60-day risk-free guarantee and a 12-month warranty. If you already got a Hello Tushy on the pot, well, time is to upgrade to that 3.0 model. And if you're new to the revolution, know that you're joining millions of happy Hello Tushy customers, and you are you're cleaning yourself with water as opposed to just dry paper. There's a reason why we don't wash our hands with dry paper. Believe me, folks. Once you go bidet, there's no other way. I don't know. Defeat swamp ass. Go to hellotushy.com/majority to get 10% off plus free shipping. This is a special offer for our listeners at hellotushy.com/majority for 10% off. hellotushy.com/majority. Emma?
We are back, and I would like to welcome to the program Karen Cox, author of No Common Ground, Confederate Monuments, and the Ongoing Fight for Racial Justice. Karen, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, well, I'm excited we finally got someone on this program to talk about this very topic, because in reading your book, I was so unaware of, I guess, the how this debate has been raging for quite a while, and it was a bit more concentrated in local activism and politics than the national conversation when it kind of sprung to the forefront in the mid-2010s. So I guess just from a 30,000-foot view, if you could talk about how, looking at Confederate monuments, you were able to kind of track or look at the history of racism in this country through that specific lens, through these flare-ups of this debate, through quieter moments, and how that was useful in analyzing this.
Yeah, so I think the common myth that, and that goes out there today is that people were only protesting Confederate monuments since Black Lives Matter was formed in 2014. And the reality is there's a much longer history of that happening that goes back to the time the first Confederate monuments were erected. So what you will see is that Confederate monuments appear, the vast majority were erected in the 1890s. This is a significant decade because it is a decade of extreme racial violence and lynching across the South. And immediately there's a move toward legalizing segregation and there's voter disfranchisement of Black men, and kind of dialing back the 15th Amendment. And you'll see these kinds of things flare up every so often throughout the 20th century. We see it again, obviously, during the civil rights era. And you have, this is also the period in the early 60s of the Civil War centennial. But it's been ongoing. Once the Voting Rights Act passed and communities were able to elect officials that looked like them, we have Black officials and local city councils. They began to challenge Confederate iconography on the grounds of courthouses. and you see that happening beginning in the 1970s. You've seen it, since 2000. And so again, there's a long history of this back and forth about Confederate monuments. The monuments only express one narrative, that is the narrative of the white South or white Southerners who believe that, for example, slavery was not a cause of the Civil War, etc.
Well, yeah, I guess that's a useful place to start, with the lost cause ideology driving this forward in the late part of the 1800s. Talk about, I guess, Edward A. Pollard, his influence over this kind of movement, and how ubiquitous, or just, I guess, present, the ideology of lost causism became in the wake of the Civil War. And interestingly too, you also write about how these monuments weren't erected right after the Civil War. It took a few years, some period of time. We can, I guess, get to that in a bit, but I'm curious about that whole period.
Okay, so Edward Pollard was a journalist, a Richmond journalist, who wrote a book called The Lost Cause, and it was meant to be a history of the Civil War, but from the Southern perspective, and he kind of lays out what he believes that had happened, and he immediately is clear that he doesn't believe, that the war was ever about slavery, and he basically says at the end of that book that nothing's been decided here except military defeat, and certainly, as he put it in that time, Negro equality had not been decided, although this was before Reconstruction and the amendments that gave the 14th Amendment and then the 15th Amendment, which gave Black men the right to vote. But that lost cause narrative that it develops immediately after the war is an effort for white Southerners to try to come to terms with defeat. They couldn't even imagine that they were going to be defeated. Right. So how can they justify it? And so they justify it by saying, well, it wasn't about, the war was never about slavery. All Confederates are turned into heroes. All the leaders, people like General Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson, they become, I call them, they're the most iconic of the lost cause heroes, and they're sort of both figuratively and literally placed on pedestals as representative of Southern men. So in that scenario, then it's really romanticizes someone like Lee, but also helps assuage defeat, helps white Southerners come to term with that. And it's also it develops, again, each generation adds to the narrative, and it develops into something that coincides with white supremacy and the growth of white supremacy in the South in a cultural way, but also politically. So the lost cause is this essentially a series of false narratives about what the war was about, making heroes out of all men, making light of slavery as though this was a benign institution. That the Ku Klux Klan of Reconstruction are also recognized as heroes in this narrative. And as I said, and the thing about it is that it begins to enter into the conversation among politicians, but it's also part of the thing that happens with children, and that there's this effort that people immediately recognize that the way forward out of this, and the way so that future Southerners don't get this narrative twisted in any other way except that this was not only a lost cause but a just cause,
right?
Then the problem is, and the why it has such staying power, and why we still hear these kinds of myths today, is because a group like the United Daughters of the Confederacy, which put up most of those monuments in the late 19th, early 20th century, were also engaged in a I would say disinformation campaign of rewriting history so that, you know, future generations of white Southerners would grow up and see it the same way that their ancestors had.
Yeah, talk a bit more about the daughters of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, because I was fascinated to read that Southern white women were pretty instrumental in this project to get these monuments erected.
Yes, you know, monuments were being erected almost immediately after the Civil War. Most of the early ones were placed in cemeteries where the Confederate dead are buried, and those were the Ladies' Memorial Associations. But the United Daughters of the Confederacy becomes the second generation of white women who are engaged in this campaign to essentially to vindicate their ancestors. And so these are generally middle class, upper class white women. They're married or related to men of power in the region, everywhere from, you know, the local judge to U.S. senators. And they have a lot of power, and they're consummate fundraisers, and they're the ones who are placing Confederate monuments. They're marking the entire landscape. The Southern landscape is just saturated with Confederate memorials. And so it's not just monuments, it's school names, it's street names, it's all kinds of things. But monuments are the most obvious, tangible reminders of their influence. And between, you know, 1895 and the First World War, that's when the vast majority go up. And that is also the same time period that the UDC is on the rise in its growth as an organization. So by World War I, that group was 100,000 women. Their membership was really, really large, and they had a lot of political influence. And they could, even at a time when women couldn't vote, they had political influence. But it was really around this issue of Confederate memorialization. So they, you know, we know everything from, there's a Confederate monument in Arlington National Cemetery. There's, you know, there are these large ones, the ones that we know about on Monument Avenue. And then of course there's those that are at local courthouses, because ultimately most the monuments are really local objects, and that's where the battle is taking place.
You mentioned that in 1890 to the early parts of the 20th century, the United Daughters of the Confederacy were growing exponentially. That also was the same time period that the KKK was growing, I would say, in prominence. I believe, I don't have the figures in front of me, but the height of their membership came at the beginning of the 20th century, if I'm wrong. I'm guessing. I'm asking for your take on that. Was that a parallel kind of growth, both groups?
Well, so that was the second Klan, the second version of the Klan, or second iteration of the Klan. And it was a little bit different than the Klan of Reconstruction, which is tended to be the group that the UDC tended to hold in high esteem. But that time period is a period of nativism in the United States, you know, a concern over immigration, over, you know, and of course, in 1915, you have the Birth of a Nation comes out in theaters as the most successful silent film of all time. And that also, you know, is instrumental to the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. Its second, you know, kind of rebirth of the Klan in 1915. And the UDC was certainly very supportive of that film and liked what they saw in the movie. But, you know, they tended to be they in part distanced themselves from the second Klan, mainly because of over class issues. They saw these as lower class, you know, whites and others that are participating in this second iteration of the Klan, whereas the first Klan were heroes because they were like generals, and they were, you know, really represented more, you know, kind of the elite of white men in the South. It's a weird thing, but you know, that's kind of how they looked at it.
And in terms of the substance of what they were pushing for, was there any difference? Like the class-based differential between these two iterations of the Klans? Like, how did that play itself out in terms of what they were pushing for?
Who was pushing for?
The first iteration of the Klan and the next.
Well, I mean, in terms of what the UDC thought, I don't know, but it's that I didn't write about the Klan. I wrote about the UDC's relationship with the Klan, which is very clear from the first Klan than it is to the second Klan.
Gotcha.
Because these women were themselves were, like, as I said, middle and upper class. And so they tend to see these as sort of like, lower class guys and that were involved in that second Klan. And they didn't want to be associated with that second Klan. Although, again, the first Klan to them was okay. They were okay with that. And the racial violence that they exacted on Black Southerners during Reconstruction.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's also was interesting to me was how Black Americans at this time were aware of this concerted kind of effort to erect these monuments, and there was a response in terms of written publications and Black intellectuals at the time speaking out about this. Talk about their response.
Yeah. So again, in the period of Jim Crow in particular, Black Southerners would have risked their lives if they had tried to protest a Confederate monument. They could have been lynched for that. And so what you see is that it's not that Black Southerners were okay with Confederate monuments. They never were. Now, you did see in the late 19th century in Richmond, Virginia, an editor of the Richmond Planet, which was the African-American paper there, John Mitchell Jr., comes out and says, he's talking about the unveiling of the enormous Lee Monument on Monument Avenue in Richmond. He said, this is a signal of bad things to come for the Black community. And it was, as Black men were being disfranchised. And then you see, though, the way you'll see sort of critiques of monuments that come out, not just among Black leaders, like W.E.B. Du Bois, but also among just regular Black Southerners who are writing in to the Chicago Defender, which is the national Black newspaper of the time, and it's in the 20s and 30s, and they're saying these monuments are, how in the world do we have such things? Why these people were treasonous? They violated their oath to West Point, somebody like Robert E. Lee. And so why would we do this? And so there's a lot of criticism around the monuments and this belief that having those monuments in place is the reason that things are so bad in terms of race relations, because these monuments, as someone wrote into the Defender, said that remind Southern children, meaning Southern white children, that they are somehow superior. And this is the thing about monuments, is that they weren't about history. They weren't about looking back. They're about looking forward. There's a nod to history, but the real purpose is to create symbols that people will revere, and future generations, is the hope, will learn these lessons and admire these people.
Right, which was a part of why it was also interesting to hear that the targeted defacing of these Confederate statues was also something that was nothing new, right?
Right.
Again, the national conversation about it is really just burgeoning in the past decade or so, but there were activists that would deface these monuments historically. Talk about that.
Well, what you would see is that once the Civil Rights Act had passed and the Voting Rights Act had passed, what you begin to see is that people are testing out the Voting Rights Act, for example. The Meredith March through the Delta of Mississippi in 1966. Very often and this is about registering voters, as they enter into these towns, into the Delta, the center of town is usually the Confederate monument, whether it's, on a main boulevard or it's on the courthouse lawn. Where do you register to vote? At the courthouse, right? And so what you will see is these marchers basically reclaiming space, reclaiming public space around Confederate monuments. And then we saw there was an incident in Tuskegee, Alabama, that I write about, the murder of Sammy Younge, who had been a student at Tuskegee. And when the white man who murdered him was acquitted, as they all kind of thought that would happen, the students marched into the town of Tuskegee from the university and at that evening, and surrounded it and began to deface it. They took black paint and slung it on the monument and painted Black Power on the side of the monument. And so, I think what it is about these kinds of incidents, that it's like symbolizes and helps us understand that Black Southerners had always known and always believed that these were offensive, these were racist, and these were icons of white supremacy in their community.
And you talked a bit about Reconstruction, but I just wanted to flesh that out a little bit. Like, did this neatly coincide with the effort to end Reconstruction? Was this sort of an empowerment for these Southerners as Reconstruction was on the outs?
Are you talking about monuments themselves?
Yes. Yes.
Well, not in the period of Reconstruction itself. So you have this sort of phases of monument building. And so during the period of Reconstruction, which lasts from the end of the Civil War to 1877, what you'll see are just the monuments are primarily located in cemeteries. Once Reconstruction ends and most of the federal troops have left the region, then you begin to see white Southerners say, okay, let's bring these monuments out into the open, sort of out into the main thoroughfare, or it becomes more celebratory. So it's sort of a middle finger to Reconstruction in a way. Once these troops are gone, and so you begin to see more of a celebratory mood around monument building, until you get to the 1890s when the UDC is formed. Then this becomes about vindication. It's more than just about celebrating heroes and commemorating heroes. Now it becomes about, what do we do, as a region going forward? We're not just going to say, put a monument up. These monuments have to say something about these men as heroes, but vindicate them from defeat, And so what you'll see is in monument unveilings, you'll have these speeches being given, and they're talking very openly about maintaining white supremacy at the unveiling of the monument. It was like, right. That's what they're celebrating, and also encouraging that be, defended going forward.
So I want to jump a little bit ahead to the civil rights era, where I think a lot of people might assume that a lot of these monuments as homages or reinforcers of white supremacy were erected during that time. But that doesn't seem to be the case, or that it wasn't the case. Talk about that dynamic, if you could.
Yeah, so there is a narrative out there that somehow there was an explosion of monuments that took place during the civil rights era. And so in the 1950s and 1960s, we saw about 40 new monuments go up. Now, some of those were during the Civil War centennial, 1961 to 65. So about 20 in each decade. So that's not like the same as on the early Jim Crow period, where you might see 400 go up or 200 go up in a year.
Right.
That's a lot. And so, but what you see is the ways in which these Confederate symbols, these monuments, are being used by new generations of people. So maybe in the 50s, instead of getting a speech about Confederate heroes on Confederate Memorial Day, what you hear is in Mississippi, in Vicksburg, for example, a speech by state politicians saying, talking about communism, talking about, protecting the state's reputation as they see, from federal intrusion over the issue of civil rights. So it's a way in which these things kind of gain a new life in a different setting and in a different historical context. And then there were those, cases I mentioned about the ways in which, on the flip side of that, how the existing monuments, and that's really what we're seeing, what you see in that period is how existing monuments become, sort of revamped in terms of the way people think about them. And so again, on the one hand, it could be about, anti-communism. On the other hand, it's about civil rights marchers reclaiming public space that's in their community because they want the right to vote. Right.
And maybe it also just kind of speaks to how the civil rights era was a period where maybe the white supremacists were a bit on the defense in that area. Like, at least in terms of erecting these monuments, it was a bit more of a political kind of fight than trying to erect these monuments to create some sort of preservation of white supremacy, if that makes any sense. I'm not sure it does, but what percentage was it? Something like 5% of the known monuments were erected in that era? A very small percentage, as you say.
I don't know what the percentage is. I just know that there was only about 20 in 1950s and another 20 in the 1960s. And so, and by comparison, there were 35 new monuments built since 2000.
Gotcha. Right. So then I guess we can fast forward to that period of time where that was the next influx of the creation of some of these monuments. What did you glean from that?
Well, I think what's happening, what you see is that when white Southerners see like there's any kind of racial progress happening, you begin to get a backlash. And this is a political backlash, but then it gets represented through monuments, for example. So in the 1990s, we began to see the first efforts at gerrymandering in the South. And there's this sense that, okay, there's been enough progress now since the Voting Rights Act of 65. We got to slow this down and maybe even turn it around and turn it backward. And so monuments are sort of representative of that. What's different since 2000 is that the new monuments that are built are primarily on private property. They're not on the public square, or they might be in cemeteries. And the reason, honestly, the public square was like covered by the UDC back, 100 years before. So it's what you begin to see pretty early on in the early 2000s, an effort to try to either move a monument or at least get it contextualized. And there was just, people were just not having it. It's like the defenders of monuments didn't even want, a contextual panel, so that we've now gotten to the point where such things, aren't even, worth the effort. And plus there's this, a contextual panel, because a lot of people say, well, why don't you just do that? Why don't you just put a panel next to the monument and say, this is what this really stood for? Well, there's an optics problem when, you have a little 6-foot panel with some wording on it, and it's standing next to a 30-foot monument. It's just like that narrative, even in the visual of that narrative, is unequal. So, what we've gotten to, though, of course, is that we're at a point where, not that they're being built, but now they're at the center of a controversy of the ones that already exist. And what do we do? And communities that want to move them are being thwarted by state monument laws that prevent their removal.
And also, I mean, you mentioned this a bit earlier, like the monuments in and of themselves are not the only structural, I guess, odes to white supremacy that exist. I mean, there are street names, there are buildings, there are all of these. I mean, Washington and Lee College is one that's quite prominent that comes to mind among a bunch of other universities and buildings. I guess just maybe talk a little bit about how that's a bit of the tip of the iceberg. This is quite widespread and quotidian in parts of the country.
Yeah, so, Confederate monuments are just one aspect of Confederate memorialization. They are obviously the most tangible, the most reminders and evidence of Confederate memorialization. But as you said, we've got street names, we have schools named for Confederate heroes, we have any number of what in some ways, in the way that the UDC works is like anything could be a monument, right? Like even a school, right? And rename a school after Robert E. Lee, and that becomes a monument of a sort. And it just varies the way from place to place, how people want to handle that. In Texas, I heard about a school, there was an effort to rename a Robert E. Lee, elementary or middle school, and local school board voted against it. In Charlotte, North Carolina, where I live, the mayor appointed a group called the Legacy Commission. And while Charlotte is not known for its monuments, it does have many streets named for former Confederates. And so there actually is a genuine effort to change street names in the city. So it just varies from place to place and depending on the will of leadership.
Right, and it does vary from place to place, and it's also not necessarily confined to the South because, there are places all over the country, Confederate flags on police badges in South Dakota. There's, as an example, our producer Matt pointed out, there's a variety of places that have these homages. So, I mean, what accounts for that, except for the fact that this is really about white supremacy and not Southern heritage?
Right. So we all know that, what happened in Charlottesville in 2017 was a gathering of white supremacists and white nationalists. This was not, they came and said, we're here to defend, the removal of the Robert E. Lee monument. But the vast majority of those guys were not even from the South, have no, links to Confederate heritage or Southern heritage at all. This was about white supremacy. The North and white Northerners and white Americans across the country have long been complicit in some ways with the lost cause. They don't mind employing the symbols of the lost cause, especially the Confederate battle flag. Whether or not they have a monument doesn't mean much. There are Confederate monuments all over the country in the North as well as the South, although the most are in the South. But the Confederate battle flag, which is, can be purchased anywhere, can be printed on anything, it's highly mobile, and it's a symbol of intimidation. It's not only a symbol of white supremacy, but a symbol of intimidation. And you see it, I talk about in the book about, a protest against in the Bronx, in which all these guys, these white guys that, were waving Confederate battle flags. You could have images from that could have been from Birmingham, Alabama, but they were from the Bronx. Battle flags are all over the place in the North. And so there, it is a symbol of white supremacy. And people talk about the history of it. It's like, there was only a 4-year period where it was actually used in a military sense. There's been over 150 years, 160 years of it being used on behalf of white supremacy.
Right. That's what it stands for. And, you talk about Charlottesville and how that brought people from all over the country. It's a great example of how national this has become and how it's transitioned from more local acts of erecting a monument, maybe protests and defacing of that monument, to now we're having a national conversation about what these symbols mean. Maybe take us more to 2014, the creation of Black Lives Matter, to now, and how this debate has evolved.
Sure. I think, obviously Black Lives Matter was, in response to other things that are happening. But I tell you what happened. It was the Charleston massacre in 2015 that really changed the game. It changed everything, because, the images of the murderer, whose name I don't like to mention, is with the Confederate battle flag draped over his shoulder. That is what led to, and eventually led to, the removal of the Confederate battle flag from the grounds of the Capitol in South Carolina. But it was that event, that tragedy, that in the summer in which, prior to the 2016 election, in which all these Republican candidates for president were put on the spot about what do you do about these things. And so it became a national conversation when that happened. And it hasn't gone away since, And so anytime you think it's about to kind of die down, so 2015, that was a terrible tragedy. Things calmed down. Then you have 2017, you have Charlottesville. Things calmed down a little bit more. Then you had George Floyd murder in 2020. This has been the pattern of the last several years, 6 years, this back and forth. And there are these flare-ups, and the flare-ups obviously around racial inequality, around systemic racism, around police brutality, etc. And Confederate symbols, flags and monuments are often at the center of that in the South. But again, beyond the South, that, battle flags show up in protest, where the Proud Boys are, for example, they're carrying not only Confederate battle flags, but Nazi flags.
What's interesting too to me about this conversation is rationalizing with white supremacy is probably not the right route to go down, but don't erase our history. This is our history. At the start of our interview and at the start of your book, we're talking about an ahistorical account that motivated this hagiography of these Confederate generals. Like, it's so interesting to me how ahistorical mythology is treated as history in order for these racists to kind of work backwards from their own white supremacist views.
It's, we have a saying that the South lost the war, the Civil War, but won the peace. And the way they won it was through the lost cause. And they couldn't have enjoyed, the longevity of the lost cause could not have been possible without complicity on the part of white Northerners who also engaged in some amnesia around the Civil War and what it had been fought for and the outcomes of the war, like emancipation. I mean, Frederick Douglass was, very concerned about that. He saw that happening and pushed against it until his death in 1895. And so, it lets us know, like, just the staying power of that narrative is kind of phenomenal. It really is. But it also, if you think about today and the ways in which people are pushing back against what they're calling critical race theory, right? So this has become the buzzword. But what it's really about is saying we don't want people to be educated to know the real history, because if they knew the real history, then they might, buck up against white power structures.
Right.
And this is not about making anybody feel bad about their race, right? This is about, let's be honest and have an honest conversation about the history of this country. And there is nothing wrong with that. There is a lot of ugly to it. And, but, again, the Lost Cause was a campaign of disinformation. And so is this current, milieu that we're in around education. It's a disinformation campaign that somehow we're teaching this to children. It's not even taught in K-12. It's a theory that gets taught in at the college level. But regardless, what it is, it's like they understand that knowledge is power. And if we can't have the real knowledge, is that we're going to give you this superficial, this mythological information. And that's a way of maintaining power, political power.
Right.
And that's what the white Southerners used for generations after generation to maintain their power in the South, and now we're seeing, we're seeing it on a national scale in this way. Let's only teach about the founding fathers. Let's only teach about American history as though everything was nice and there were no dark periods. It's that kind of stuff.
Lastly, do you have optimism? The Mississippi flag shift, the Confederate monuments do seem to be coming down in some fashion, not at the rate they should be, but
well, here's the thing, it really boils down to like who controls politics in the state, and so with these Republican dominated legislatures, we're not, that have instituted laws that prohibit the changing of things, moving a monument or taking one down. And so that's, to me, is disheartening. I mean, the removal of that one symbol. Okay, let's remove, even if today we were able to remove every Confederate monument, we have not have healed people in terms of what they think about race and race relations in this country. I mean, the conversation has to be, it's not about the symbols, it's about the real issues of racism and white supremacy and this cultural and political divide that we exist in at this moment.
Karen Cox, her book is called No Common Ground, Confederate Monuments and the Ongoing Fight for Racial Justice. Karen, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break, and we will be back to wrap things up. We are back to wrap things up here for all of you lovely folks on Peacock. Let's go to Fox News again. We got to do this. We got to monitor what's going on over there at that complete insane asylum. Kayleigh McEnany, former, of course, White House spokesperson under Trump, was on Fox News yesterday with Jesse Waters, and she made a claim that elicited some laughs, and you'll understand why.
Right. We are 8 months into a Biden presidency, Jesse. Wrap your head around that. We still have 3 years and 4 months left. Look, when President Trump was president, you didn't see crisis after crisis. You just didn't see it. I am shocked.
Huh? What? Huh? Huh?
It's very kind of alarming how they just reflect talking points from like 4 years ago, because this is what people were saying when it was, people went to airports to protest the Muslim ban, for instance.
Right.
Like that was quite disruptive. Completely self-inflicted sort of scandal or whatever. And it was people saying, I remember under Obama I didn't have to do this. They're literally just, it's like they cut and paste.
Yeah, well, they also, I mean, they don't necessarily want to, they do cut and paste, right? And like everybody that's watching that is going to nod in agreement. Yes, you're absolutely right. Under Donald Trump, we did not see the mass mismanagement of coronavirus. We did not see him encourage people to inject bleach into their body and throw that out there as a possible solution to the pandemic that has now killed over 600,000 Americans and millions of people worldwide.
He wasn't getting in pissing contests, or Trump was getting in pissing contests with like veterans, people who dead veterans' parents, like, right, the Gold Star families.
Right, but the thing about that is that, well, imagine if that happened with a Democratic president, of course, but like they want to play all of those things off of, and by two impeachments in the House, they want to play all of that off as, okay, you know, this is just media manufactured scandals for Donald Trump. Under Biden, we're seeing real concrete ones. And the reality is that, yes, we are still dealing with the pandemic. Could the CDC have dealt with things a little bit better, potentially not dropping mask mandates for the vaccinated that early on? Yes, we can quibble with that. But the vaccine rollout in this country, it's unconscionable what we've done worldwide, has been good. The withdrawal from Afghanistan was a good thing, even though, of course, there is going to be a fallout from us propping up a government for quite a while and then that vacuum being filled once we leave, but it had to be done. And so, like, that's all they can hang their hat on. What's the next crisis going to be? Kamala Harris's laugh? Like, there are quibbles to be made and real criticisms of Biden from the left that we could engage in, but they're not going to engage in that. So they just always, like, work themselves up as actors in like acting school to get outraged, right? They really, what's the method of acting where you react and you live in every experience? I'm forgetting. It's
method acting.
No, that's not method acting. It's you're in character the whole time. There's like something about losing, I forget. It's some fancy technique, but they're experts in it. They didn't even need to go to acting school because they're able to completely feel this outrage. It's got to be authentic, even if they know it's pretty much BS. All right, guys. Thanks to the Peacock audience. For the rest of you, we'll see you in a bit. Peacock audience, we will see you tomorrow. All right. Now we are alone.
I had some things to say about the Confederacy.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing a lot of reading about Bismarck, North Dakota. Founded 1873, so post-Civil War, when the trains had finally extended the Northern Pacific Railroad. Northern Pacific Railroad the line was surveyed by Thomas Lafayette Rosser, who was a Confederate cavalry general who was hired by the Northern Pacific Railroad to run, the line. And Custer, of course, was also across the river from Bismarck at Fort Mandan, Fort Abraham Lincoln. And they had actually taken part in a battle against each other during the Civil War, but they were West Point classmates, so they were like sort of friendly and stuff like that. Like Custer waved to him and stuff. But anyway, the whole point of this is that we reconciled way too quickly with the wrong people after the Civil War in the name of unity. And you see that rhetoric all over the newspapers of the time saying, oh, this was all behind us and done now. We need to come together and basically exterminate Native Americans, which is fundamentally why you have two generals, cavalry generals taking part in, formation of a town is because, you're going to have to go deal with the Lakota and Nakota and Dakota Sioux. So yeah, I don't know. I like whenever I hear moderates talk about unity, I think of two cavalry generals, a Confederate and a Union guy coming together to form Bismarck, and it's not
murder a bunch of Native Americans.
Murder a bunch of Native Americans, and basically continue the genocide of I don't want to say this. I forget the full name. Mendewakan. I can't think
It's
of the
okay.
name. But anyway, yeah, and continue that, and also do some infrastructure. So yeah, I mean that's the problem with unity. I think in this country where we have a whole class of people that is devoted to white supremacy.
Great point. We have a Louis Gohmert, eco crusader, writes in Meisner. That was the technique I was thinking of. Thank you very much. It's not method acting. It's not. It's different. Method acting is the term for the complete emotional identification of the parts, says Sam's sad sabbatical. Anyway, I appreciate everybody writing in, trying to quench my curiosity on that part. Matt, what's happening over on Left Reckoning? You're doing your stream tonight, right?
Yeah, tonight Chip Gibbons talking about civil liberties, Assange, Daniel Hale. We'll also be talking about an old Nixon tape the morning of the release of the Pentagon Papers, and if things have gotten better or worse, maybe, for whistleblowers since then. Yeah, Kissinger appears. And so that's tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central, Literary Hangover YouTube channel, patreon.com/Literary Hangover.
All right, check out the Nomiki show, and it's 646-257-3920. See you all in the fun half.
You are in for it. All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Cedar! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males...
Psych. Fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100.
Can't knock the hustle.
Come on! Fuck them.
Things I do for the bigger game plan.
By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Welcome to the fun half, everybody. let's take a call.
Let me just say real quick. I forgot why I forgot the key point is to this day Rosser Avenue. It goes through downtown Bismarck.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I never quite knew why. I wonder what this street is named after. It's the Confederate.
I'm trying to. I did so much driving down Bismarck, down
Bismarck
in downtown. Yeah, right. I was just trying to see. I'll look that up after the show where that was relative, because me trying to look at the map on air might not be the best kind of programming.
Yeah, no, but I mean the other interesting thing is from a map perspective is the two highways that go up and down the Missouri River. On the east side is Highway 1804, and on the west side is 1806, and that's because Lewis and Clark went up and down there. So like the history of American empire, and that's 1806 is the one you go down to go to the Dakota, where the Dakota Access Pipeline crossed.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Get no cell service on that road. One time we got caught there, no cell service, and it was pitch black and the map wasn't working. So like there's no lights on the road. Yeah. So that was kind of a scary situation. Like we didn't know we were going the right way. Somehow there was a dirt road we were supposed to turn onto, didn't seem right. Ended up being okay. But yeah. That's brings back some memories thinking about that. Anyway, let me take a call or two. Ooh, calling from a 718 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, is this me?
Yeah, this is you.
So dope. Yeah, this is Danny from Atlanta.
Danny from Atlanta. How are you?
I'm doing well, Emma. You guys are doing a great job. Just wanted to start off there.
Thank you.
I tried calling yesterday, and I wanted to talk to Nomiki specifically because I know she keeps bringing up what our foreign policy is going to be and how, if we do inherit this U.S. military, what do we do with it? And I don't know. I'm, just to kind of, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that specifically.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me, there's so much work that has to be done in the States. And I think we've kind of lost sight as to what any military is responsible for. And that's protecting its citizens here, whether that's, by, assault or also the environmental damage that's being caused by certain corporations. Climate change isn't going to go anywhere, unfortunately. There's going to be a lot of things that we are going to need help with stateside. So I think, when we think about our responsibility to the international community, I think looking at everything, I can't help but think that we would be better off just pulling out completely. I'm getting a call from my boss, so I'll let you go.
Oh, well, sure. We'll answer your question then. Just tell your boss we said hi.
I think this is a good opportunity. I don't know where you want to go with this, but to play this this clip number 6 about this vet.
Sure. Well, before we do that, I mean, I think your instincts are right in that we have to cut the military budget a lot. And it could be an opportunity, or it would be with a different kind of president. I don't foresee this with Biden, who truly is largely invested in the American empire existing as it does, but found the continued occupation in Afghanistan to be nonsensical, which he's right about. But it was more about a pulling off the Band-Aid approach and his instinct and gut that we shouldn't be in Afghanistan for this period of time, than in opposition to doing similar things in future places down the road. And I think the way progressives should approach this is a concerted effort to encourage military spending cuts and a reallocation of those funds to different parts of our government that need it more.
Yeah, I just think war fighting, particularly as an activity, is doomed. I mean, it's like you see Vietnam happen, and it's like, okay, well, maybe this is just the military got too involved in like a anti-communism, and outside of that, maybe they can actually do some good.
Well, that's what that was, the whole like pundit class behind the Iraq War saying, we lived through Vietnam, but they didn't know what they were doing. Here we're fighting a real bad enemy, Saddam Hussein.
And the outcome is basically the same: a whole bunch of grift and torture and murder. And so, like, it's just not the technology that's good for really anything. I think.
Are you trying to say that war is bad? Because that's not a very serious position.
I'm trying to say, like, war. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. That's what I'm saying. I guess. From the top rope, Bradley. Appreciate it. Like, that's the thing too. Is we say on the left, war is bad, and there are the overwhelming response from the power structure is, you're a fucking idiot. You're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. You're an unserious person. You don't belong in polite discourse. And like, that's what has to change. And I worry that we're still in the same place where that is not considered serious. Yeah, I mean, Stephen Kinzer has a really good book about Mark Twain and a whole bunch of people basically 100 years ago that thought, like, okay, now's the time, we're going to abolish war. And it's tough to read because we aren't even, that idea seems so fantastical that it's left out of the room at this point in world history, and it's horrible because like the reason they say like you're not serious is because they have connections to state power, and they also have a lot of weapons, and it's hard to be serious in the face of that.
Right, and the future of warfare from these types on the political left, not the real left, but like the Democratic Party at the very least, is going to be sanitized warfare with drones and with like, maybe we won't occupy this territory, but we will stay in an ally's military base in a nearby nation, and we'll do flyover bombings, and we'll protect our American troops. Notice the focus that Biden placed on American troops. We'll protect our folks while doing what still needs to be done. As opposed to where the conversation needs to be is that warfare in a modern society is fucking pointless and stupid and barbaric. Like, having an anti-war position is what needs to be where we push the left towards, and it's anti-interventionist, anti-imperialist, anti-war, all wrapped up in one, and you make that case cohesively and without apologies.
Yeah, like what a model foreign policy looks like is the way like for instance Cuba's foreign policy export, which is doctors, and they in part need this to get over the sanctions and embargo, because people do pay their doctors and that money gets sent back. But that's what actually like projecting power in a positive way looks like. Guns, I mean, weapons manufacturers are satanic. Like, to the extent that could be like, compared to any sort of monster movie monster, these people kill way more people and do way more damage to the earth and to politics and just world history, and we need to get a hold on them.
Right. All right. Did you want to play that clip, Matt?
I don't know if we really need to. I just think it's interesting, you know, when someone says like, what good is the military if we can't save a certain amount of people? It's like, I understand and sympathize with that desire, and I think absolutely we're using air power to save a bunch of people, tens and tens of thousands. But like, again, it almost sanitizes the military again. Like, that's not what the military does. It doesn't save people. It just doesn't.
Right. Let's turn to, I guess, Tony Blair at this point, because this pairs nicely with our Afghanistan discussion. So, former British Prime Minister Tony Blair was on Sky News over the weekend, and you might remember him as the BFF of George W. Bush, who was enthusiastic in aiding Bush's war on terror, much to the chagrin of anti-war activists within his own country and internationally. he still has the gall to speak on these issues despite being a national embarrassment for these positions and much of the British population having deep resentment for their own involvement in an illegal war, and also in Afghanistan, but particularly in Iraq, of course, as other nations like France disengage when they realize how much of a fool's errand and how faulty the intelligence was coming out of the Bush administration and their bloodthirstiness. But, you know, he's consistent, Tony Blair. Here's his response to Biden's withdrawal out of Afghanistan.
Look, our troops were fantastic in Afghanistan, and a lot of them made the ultimate sacrifice. A lot of them were injured. And it's really important that they know that this wasn't a hopeless endeavor, and it wasn't a bad cause. It was a good cause.
Pause it. Oh, like that just boils my blood, right? It's important that they know that they didn't die in vain, essentially, that this was a good cause. You know who the onus is on for that? You. It's on the powerful people to, if you don't have an anti-war position on principle, only send troops into wars that you feel are just. He still believes this. He still believes that the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq serve some purpose, which is like some sort of mental disorder or derangement that I can't fully understand. One that protects his own ego, probably. Like, you have to work backwards from that. But, like, no, that's on you. That's not on the continuation of a war that was faulty from its outset. It's on the decision makers at the beginning to make that choice. And you made the wrong choice.
Yeah, I mean, Tony Blair's a guy who he's motivated to say that they made the ultimate sacrifice because he put them into a pointless sacrifice.
Right. Well, he has to ascribe meaning to their sacrifice. Otherwise, he looks like the sociopath that he is. So that was an early posit, but maybe just start it from the beginning, Bradley, because, like, damn, he came out hot. And thus I responded in kind.
Look, our troops were fantastic in Afghanistan, and a lot of them made the ultimate sacrifice. A lot of them were injured. And it's really important that they know that this wasn't a hopeless endeavor, and it wasn't a bad cause. It was a good cause. You know, we went there because we had a state of Afghanistan turned in to a state that was run by an extremist Islamist group that were harboring people who were carrying out attacks, you know, like the 9/11 attack.
Okay, pause it. I'm sorry. Bradley, I'm so sorry. There's going to be a million posits. How did it turn into this Taliban state? How did it turn into a state run by religious extremists? Could it have been the fact that we funded and armed those very religious extremists under the guise of combating the Soviet Union and communism, giving them rise to power and allowing for that kind of ecosystem to flourish? What could, like...
The Taliban turned into having a meeting with Ronald Reagan.
Right. Yeah, they... Oh, God, right. It's just like the way that things evolve. You know, you never know how it's going to happen. Seasons change. Tides come in, tides go out. Made. Taliban comes to Ronald Reagan's offices. Taliban leaves with weapons and money. You can't explain that. Continue.
Terrorist groups around the world. We went in there for very good reasons. And we achieved a lot thanks to those British and American and other armed forces over the last 20 years. And what I'd say to them is the sacrifice was not in vain. Those 20 years, by the way, matter. You know, what we achieved in Afghanistan matters today. I actually spoke yesterday to an Afghan general who himself was fighting the Taliban just literally days ago. And he said, you know, do not forget, we made huge progress during those 20 years. My generation has grown up knowing something different from the Taliban, and we're determined at some stage and in some way to get our country back. So I think it's really important that people realize that the story of Afghanistan and the story of the Taliban takeover, it's not over. It's tragic what's happened. I think it's unnecessary.
In any way,
I think we made a serious mistake in doing this in this way, but it isn't over yet.
What a creep. He should be investigated for war crimes himself.
Oh, it isn't over yet. No. I'm just basically mentally deranged.
He said, as the Taliban takes over the whole country, it might appear as if we didn't do anything. But I tell you what, when you wish upon a star...
You wake up and the Taliban is far behind me.
An Afghan general might be wishing upon that same star.
Yes, and maybe if we each throw a quarter into the fountain, one Taliban throws a quarter in, I throw a quarter in, then we switch bodies, and then I will be able to implement the British Parliament in Afghanistan, and that is what our operations there entail. So we're just hoping for a Freaky Friday-like type situation. As long as we keep troops in Afghanistan a little bit longer, we'll be able to achieve our goals. It was not in vain. It was not in vain. I don't even know what else to say at that point. Like,
I mean, this is a bit glib, but it sounds like Hitler saying that. We showed the French people we accomplished a lot there, and we're not there anymore. D-Day was bad for us, but we showed them what a different world could look like.
All right.
It turned into that. It turned into a place where these fundamentalists had all these guns. We had to do
literally days ago.
Literally. Glass-Steagall, a CIA agent on MSNBC arguing for extending the withdrawal date, said, imagine how those last troops will feel flying out with people still in the airport. My answer is I bet they will feel terrible, and I hope they feel terrible, and they should feel terrible. Whatever their mission was other than making contractors rich, they failed at it. Biden is supposed to care how these losers feel enough to change policy. I mean, again, I don't think that we necessarily should be going after the troops specifically. I think it's a bit more counterproductive.
You should aim a fire a bit higher than
a little
the
higher.
20-year-olds that took it because of the opportunity. I mean, sir, there are I'm down for investigating sort of right-wing fascist beliefs among rank and file troops, but I think blaming Afghanistan on them is a bit much.
But your point though, that it should be internalized among people that fought there that this was all for nothing.
Yeah.
Is
I mean, that's a problem with Vietnam, is you had the prisoners of war missed in action thing, which sort of is sort of like a formalized stab in the back narrative that I don't think did a whole lot of people a lot of good. I mean, I didn't probably funnel people towards the right, I think.
Karen writes in, Emma, did you ask today's guest how she feels about her name being an epitaph? No, I didn't ask her about that, but maybe next time. Prairie Fire, hi, hey Emma and MR crew, great interview today. The interview kind of reminded me of Left Reckoning's fun half last week when discussing Thomas Paine. The fact that we kind of don't talk about him a lot in public school on par with Ben Franklin or Alexander Hamilton, and that no monuments were made to the guy who basically encouraged independence, normalizing the sentiment before everyone else, says a lot about the people in charge and the dynamics they want history to reflect. History is tricky, leftist poggers.
Yeah, I mean, Hamilton was pro-finance, so of course we're going to make a play about how cool he was, and Ben Franklin was at least popularly understood, and I think there's a bit of irony to some of the things he said, but the waste not, want not, and be productive all the time. Of course, we know why American elites want to celebrate that, but in terms of the only founding father who was an abolitionist and who thought we should have a social security service and a universal sort of inheritance sort of program where at 18 everybody gets a certain amount of financial security. Yeah, it's very obvious why we don't hear as much about Tom Paine. But Tom Paine he's the coolest as far as the founding fathers, and I know he's the only one that I think I would say overall good.
Yeah. My reasons for not watching Hamilton on Disney Plus are just I basically have a Glenn Greenwald type cultural resentment towards the liberals that like it, which is fine
that's
enough.
Right.
Yeah, it's correct.
You can totally understand where he's coming from in the context of Hamilton.
Yes, that on that we are aligned. On that important topic, we are certainly aligned. Emma, Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. Kayleigh isn't McEnany sense with those comments, but I'm kind of surprised no one gave her the nickname Baghdad Barbie. Well, I mean, we weren't really talking about Baghdad during that time, I think. Too much. Flairchild, Metz Park in Austin, Texas was renamed Mendez Park. Metz was a Confederate general. Mendez is a community leader, a huge improvement. I used to play bike polo there and had no idea who Metz was. Play bike polo, it's fun. No, Flairchild, but I'm glad you had fun.
That sounds like a great way to get, you know, when your pedals spin back and hit you in the shins?
Uh-huh.
That sounds like what would happen in bike polo.
Oh my God.
Wait, so is that just polo, like with bikes instead of horses?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I was watching a little of the Paralympics the other day on NBC. So like, I mean, but they're like good at that. They've practiced with that. I think I would really hurt my ankles. I'd get like that black, and not practice. That's not the right way to say it. My point is just like, it was cool to see how the Paralympics work in that area. But like the amount of wheels with people who aren't like not necessarily used to being around wheels all the time, crashing into each other might be a little difficult.
One of the most North Dakota-ass thing I ever went to was indoor basketball game on donkeys. It was donkey basketball, and it was actually at the same gym that we played high school basketball on. So,
in North Dakota?
Mandan, North Dakota. If you search, I bet you there's YouTube videos of donkey basketball being played. I bet you some places still do it.
I mean, that's kind of like polo, but for non-assholes, just fun people.
Wait, who's the non-assholes? The people on donkeys?
The people on donkeys playing basketball, not the people on, like, $400,000 horses hitting mallets around.
Yeah, no, it is definitely more of a lower class version of horse polo.
Right. Right. Freaky Friday with Tony Blair. Oh God, I wish I could keep doing that British accent. Afghanistan was only bad because they didn't take bin Laden when we were offered him a few weeks after the start. If we got him and left within a month of starting the war, I doubt anyone would have cared at all about it. Am I wrong? Well, like, again, you know, I try to have an anti-war, anti-imperialist like perspective. I would agree that would have been if the purpose. Yes, I would agree with you. And I could understand that a lot more, definitely. And I think I agree. But that wasn't the administration we had, right? I think like there was always going to be a response to 9/11 in that time. And it should have been get bin Laden, ruin their network, essentially, within the context of what was possible politically. But they were offered him, and they said no. They wanted to do a scorched earth war, and they wanted to completely destroy every Muslim that was in the area, and they wanted to be in Afghanistan long enough for them to be able to make the case for Iraq. People forget that once Iraq ramped up, a lot of our resources just were completely siphoned and went there, because that was always what the Bush administration wanted to do. So it's a bit of revisionist thinking in that area. I understand the point. It's just like all of the context doesn't make that point possible. Delta Blues, bike polo is absolute legit. Shout out to the Lexington, Kentucky bike polo. Noble Villing, we did donkey basketball in Arkansas when I was a kid every year. Definitely a rural thing. It was mildly amusing. I feel bad for the donkeys a little bit.
I know. I think that's probably why they might not do it so much anymore. I feel like I haven't seen. I mean, I've been living in New York for 10 years, but even that was when I was younger, they were doing donkey basketball.
Right. Let's take another call. Calling from a 612 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Davion in Minneapolis.
Davion in Minneapolis. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good.
So I just wanted to mention that today at the Minnesota State Capitol, there's Line 3 protest in St. Paul, downtown, and it's at 2:00. It's organized by Treaties Not Tar Sands .com. And I just wanted to call attention to that today because people are going to be trying to hold the Capitol grounds in a bid to convince, to draw a bunch of attention to the issue. The Minnesota Supreme Court just denied to hear an appeal from groups. I think that was today, I think, and so we're trying to get people to go there. We want people on your show to be aware of that. And if anyone has connections to organizations to put together like bail funds, there's people up north who are sitting in jail and need our help. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And I was curious. I don't know if y'all have talked about that recently. I haven't tuned in a bit.
Yeah, I want to talk more about Line 3, and it's on me that I haven't talked more about it. When Sam's out, it's just like a little harder to juggle some stuff. I'm just a lot busier, but I want to give Line 3 its due. I did interview for our Peacock show a Indigenous woman who we spoke a lot about the schools where there were mass graves discovered of Indigenous children, and then we talked more about pipeline protests in general, a little bit about Line 3. It's going to come out next week on Peacock. But on this show, I want to have a bit more of a robust discussion about Line 3 specifically. So I appreciate you calling in. It's why you guys make my job a little bit easier, because we can outsource some of this to our great listeners. And I never miss an opportunity to suck up to you guys either. So
thanks a lot. I appreciate that, and I'll look into finding that thing you were talking about on Peacock. Another thing I wanted to mention is there's a foot march from like camps up north. Actually, don't know if I remember where, but they're walking like 270 miles or something like that to this protest on foot. And
how many miles you said? I'm sorry, I was sneezing.
I believe it's like 270 miles, something like that, 280 miles. And they're going to be welcomed at the Capitol grounds, and I don't know. We're expecting a lot of people to camp there, and I hope it gets the attention it deserves.
Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for taking my call.
Thanks, Davion. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah. I want to talk more about Line 3. Maybe we can just make a note about that just to cover it a little bit more. And if anybody has like any videos of protests we can use in terms of just having some sound and something to show as a visual, just tweet at me and tag me, and I'll look out for it. So really appreciate that, guys. All right, let's do a clip or two. Oh, Dennis Prager. Here we go. So, Dennis Prager is promoting ivermectin. He's not the only person on the internet promoting ivermectin. To my
a lot of free speech activists are really into it now.
Right. A lot of people want to take those horse meds. So, Prager is now in real time demonstrating how right-wingers are shifting the goalposts after the FDA approval of the COVID Pfizer vaccine. It's been fully approved by the FDA, and we all predicted, it was an easy prediction, that once that happens, right-wingers, Marjorie Taylor Greene has been open about this, like, okay, if it doesn't even have full approval, how can we trust it? Even though, like, I thought you weren't trusting the government in the first place overseeing the vaccine, but the FDA is a part of the government and their approval means the world to you, but it doesn't really, because now they are shifting the goalposts once again. And also, another aspect of what we heard from the right wing in the argument was, talk to your doctor about the vaccine. I'm not telling you to take the vaccine. Don't listen to politicians. Talk to your doctor. This is a personal decision between you and your doctor. Prager's shifted on doctors.
Why should doctors be any better than lawyers or professors or any other group that has disgraced itself in American life?
Or talk show hosts.
There's no reason. Doctors have the same degree of wisdom as gender studies professors.
Oh.
The issue isn't medical knowledge. The issue is wisdom and courage. There are plenty of doctors who have it. Read about the Great Barrington Declaration. From Great Barrington, what is it, Vermont? Or New Hampshire?
I actually think it's Massachusetts.
Oh, is it Massachusetts?
I'm not sure.
He's not sure. He is checking. That's the good news.
All right, we can skip like 30 seconds ahead.
Instantaneously. Nothing. Knows about it.
This is good.
Your doctor knows nothing about COVID. Nothing. All they know is how the virus works. That's all they know. It is an amazing
Wait, pause
thing.
it. Hold on. Your doctor knows nothing about COVID except exactly how the virus works.
Your mechanic knows nothing about cars except how the V6 engine works.
They know nothing about cars except every
it's
part
a novel,
of the car.
It's a novel virus, you idiot. There are some unknowns about it. That's sort of like definitional.
Yeah, the only person that knows about COVID is God. So, and God hasn't told us to take the vaccine. Although, didn't the Pope come out and say, I'm pro-vax?
Yeah, well, the Pope's woke, so.
Yes, well, obviously he's been teaching critical race theory, so we can't trust him. But, he's supposed to be the guy who's speaking for God, and he's been pro-vaccine. I don't know. Who knows more about COVID than God? He's the one that put this plague upon us to punish us for the critical race theory.
Keep going, brother.
Yeah.
Ask your doctor if he even knows about it. Your doctor knows nothing about COVID. Nothing. All they know is how the virus works. That's all they know.
I'm sorry. He was talking about ivermectin.
It is an amazing thing that listening to this show, a non-doctor, you have learned more about COVID, more about masks than your doctor probably knows. Not only is it not a boast, it is totally meant to be an attack on the medical profession. I should not know 10 times more than your doctor about all of the issues with therapeutics.
Teenager, I know 10 times more.
And if your doctor thinks ivermectin is dangerous, change your doctor. And I mean it. Might be a nice guy.
Yeah.
But check out another doctor.
Yeah. If your poison control center says that you probably shouldn't have taken ivermectin off-label, get a new poison control center would be my advice.
Yeah, he seems quite convinced he knows more about doctors, and more than doctors, about ivermectin. So this is, their new hydroxychloroquine. Ivermectin is what's going to save you. It's not the vaccine, which now has FDA approval, which we all said what we wanted. We needed to know for it to be safe. What's truly safe is for you to take a horse dewormer, meant for livestock for the most part, and there's no evidence that it helps with COVID. Nothing conclusive at the very least.
Yeah,
and
there's many a certain amount of studies, many retracted, none of like massive sample sizes you would need. But I say that, but also it is being studied. It is being studied. There is not this big conspiracy to silence this stuff. And the fact that people are calling into poison control centers in increasing numbers means that maybe there's actually too much irresponsible speculation going on about it in channels that aren't doctors. And so, like, the thing about ivermectin, like, sure, there is actually uses in humans to do with the parasites, it's my understanding. And even early on, could there have been some sort of use for the treatment of COVID for it? they looked into it, and it looks like not really. There, it looks like they studied that actually. They didn't say, "Oh no, let's be afraid to study this because the woke people will cancel us from our doctor jobs."
Well, because it's threatening big pharma.
Of course, certain like this thing that Merck owns.
Right, threatening big pharma. You know, the biggest threat to big pharma is if you take and purchase a substance that Merck owns and manufactures.
Another product made by big pharma. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think you look at like the rising poison control calls, and it's clear that people are doing like they were eating, you know, what was it, the fish treatment stuff for hydroxychloroquine or whatever.
Yeah.
Like people, this is irresponsible because again, you have people like Dennis Prager and a whole bunch of others saying your doctor doesn't know shit, take this shit, and people are doing it and it's poisoning them, and it's not saving them from COVID. You know, it would do that. Make them less likely to die from COVID is a vaccine.
Yeah. And there are people, I mean, like, guys, Jimmy Dore is talking about ivermectin. Just if, like, we want an indication of what side.
I mean, Dore's part of that group.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, he's with Dennis fucking Prager on this. This is the same audience that he's courting. So.
No, it's the group think. The biggest problem now is that it's the sort of elites, liberal elites that are going to content moderate you to death.
Yeah, you know what's good when dealing with a global pandemic is to supersede all health concerns and what is being told to you by professionals and doctors. Doctors, we know you care about, ask your doctor. Like what they would say about ask your doctor is like, we know you're not actually going to ask your doctor and you're not going to actually take the vaccine because your doctor would tell you to take the vaccine, by the way. But like what's really important and responsible is in a global pandemic where everyone needs to come together and beat this thing and take health officials' words seriously is to deem them as a part of a liberal elite and make sure that cultural resentment about the liberal elites is at the forefront of your commentary on that global pandemic. So we're going to lump in doctors, scientists, Fauci with like, you hate Kamala Harris's laugh, right? They're the same person. And so you not doing what they tell you to do, which could save your life, that's your act of sticking it to those elites that you really just can't stand. And often that coincides with them being women or them being black or them being Latino or they being indigenous or them being Asian. Like oftentimes those all become this one big messy amalgamation, and you get to take it out on them by taking a dewormer that's meant to treat conditions in fucking livestock. That's exactly what you're gonna do. Like, that's deranged. And so, speaking of Dore, they're speaking to the same exact people here, and it's about tapping into that very rage and purposefully muddying the waters and making it all about the same group of people, a cabal, if you will, of globalists. And some of them may be Jewish too. And they're all trying to get you to do something. And you're not going to do that, right? You're not going to give it to them.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think the chicken shit thing about this is how it is like, oh, I'm not actually interested in, I don't know, I'm not a doctor myself, but I do know when there is somebody being censored for, trying to say things the powers that be don't want you to, and that's just what this is trafficking in. And yeah, I think everybody who did that should be forced to listen to these poison control calls. And yeah, I don't know. And it's also like the way it's like the socialism of fools sort of thing. Like as if this is the way to take it to big pharma. These motherfuckers have just reproduced these advertisements. They're saying ask your doctor about this or that. A thing that countries that aren't that don't have their pharmaceutical systems controlled by as much by capitalists don't have to do. Right? Like we do this thing like ask your doctor about this, ask your doctor about that, and it makes you feel empowered. Well, that's all this hydroxychloroquine shit is. That's all this ivermectin stuff is. If ivermectin could help you, your doctor'd fucking know about it.
Yeah, just whatever. I don't care. Play the Dore clip, Bradley.
I'm going to be talking about ivermectin, and I'm going to be talking about the alternative therapies to treat COVID. And isn't it funny Dr. Fauci never mentions ivermectin? Isn't it funny Dr. Fauci never mentions the fact that we could have cut the deaths from COVID by a third if we had Medicare for all? Isn't that interesting, Ron, that Dr. Fauci never mentions Medicare for all or ivermectin? Is that interesting?
Pause. I don't want to watch anymore.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, we're good.
I think it's fucking infuriating to see somebody put Medicare for all in the same sentence as you're prescribing ivermectin.
And it's all the elites, the same elites, Matt.
Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny? Yeah, it's pretty funny how Fauci hasn't been promoting ivermectin. That's hilarious.
It is hilarious. And Medicare for all. You know who's standing in the way of Medicare for all? Anthony Fauci. It's the same people. Like, you want to talk about something that doesn't help actually advance Medicare for all.
No, these people, I'm sorry, but fuck Fauci. I think Fauci, there's a great piece by Sam Adler-Bell. Fauci's a piece of shit going back decades, whatever.
Right, but
the point I want to say is that Dore is symbiotic with Fauci. When Dore comes off and says, just attacks him with bullshit like, why aren't you promoting ivermectin? That rebounds to Fauci's credibility. That makes the liberals love Fauci even more because it's Daddy Fauci protecting me from this fucking idiot.
I'd take that over. I mean, like.
Oh, I trust Fauci more than Dore.
Well, the point is, like, I don't even like engaging in the delineating between Fauci, I think, and I don't know. My point is taken, right? Like, conflating those two things, prescribing ivermectin and fighting for Medicare for all is the same thing. It couldn't be more disingenuous and sapping of the energy behind Medicare for all, and that's exactly why he is not actually genuinely interested in that policy as a set, because like
that's why he's a wrecker.
Right. Well,
that's why he was always a wrecker, even back to force the vote. If people want to keep bringing that up, let's talk about Jimmy Dore's role in that.
Well, let's talk about like endorsing Tulsi Gabbard for president, like who didn't support Medicare for all. It's like unbelievable, these people.
Narrowing the idea that the only thing we should be leveraging Pelosi for is a single vote, which was always stupid. But we should move on before I get more angry.
Yeah. Yeah. That was epic, though. Good stuff. All right, let's take another call or two. Calling from a 614 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, am I on?
Yes, you are.
Hi, Emma. Hi, Matt. Hi, Brandon. This is Harry from Columbus.
Carrie from Columbus. Brandon is not with us anymore. He's thriving, but it's Bradley now.
Oh, my goodness. And I knew that, too. I just forgot to switch the names.
No, don't worry.
I'll get to my point.
It's a double BR. It's hard.
All right. So you guys talk about J.D. Vance a lot on the show.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a moron through and through. I won't get further into that because I wanted to discuss how he's running for Senate in Ohio, and he's taking up Rob Portmancy. He's running for Rob Portmancy, and if we want to look holistically at Rob Portman, right now probably the most relevant thing is, the bipartisan deal is called the, Cinema Portman deal, right? So looking at him and comparing him to the potentials that could be coming through here, it's looking a little grim in terms of how far right that seat might be going. What do you think about J.D. Vance and if he was in the Senate, what he would do? Would he have any sort of sway? Do you think he'd become occupying a space like Hawley? Or go ahead. Yeah.
No, I think he'd be in the pocket of Peter Thiel. He'd be a pretty right wing crypto fascist in the Senate. I don't think he has the skills or charisma to win. But I mean, it's clear who is funding that guy. Is not somebody whose political project is one I want to see fulfilled. So
Matt, I'm glad you say that because I don't think he can win either, right? So if we start talking about the others who could be coming into the Senate here, well, we're looking at two possibilities, right? There's Josh Mandel, who was a legislator in Ohio at the state level. Look up his history if you want to see some fun stuff, just ridiculous right-wing level things that you wouldn't even believe. And then if we look at another likelihood, Jane Timken, well, she's been running the Ohio Republican Party for the last decade. So she's been overseeing this right-wing shift. So overall, I just don't think it's looking good in terms of this seat, and I don't think the left has any sort of chance with either Tim Ryan or the progressive who's stated she's going to run, Morgan Harper.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ohio. I need to look more into the specifics of the Vance race. Like, I think Hawley's a good example of what he kind of would like attempt to be if he were to win, but I agree it's not looking good. I don't have faith in Tim Ryan to be successful, and especially in the way that Ohio has moved so far right in such a short period of time. Given where it was,
I live in Columbus, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it voted for Obama twice, right? And then voted for Trump even more in 2020. Like, can you square that logic? I don't know. It's difficult. So I think I guess my final point is that Ohio has a lot of population. I live in Columbus, and in terms of the census numbers, it jumped like 5 spots in the list. So it's a very up and coming metropolitan area. I think there is a lane for progressives, maybe, but I don't think it's coming this year, and I don't have much faith in the Senate being rebalanced in any sort of way towards the left. Thanks for taking my call, guys.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks so much, Carrie.
Yeah, Josh Mandel is a psycho, by the way.
Yeah, I don't doubt it.
I mean, is there a state Republican Party that you can look at and not think like this is bad and getting worse? Like the national stuff is bad, but the state party is all just freaks too. I mean, I pay more attention to particularly in Minnesota, but
Wisconsin,
right? Wisconsin, another one.
Yeah, well, I mean, and they're having a ton of success on the state level. Like, I think, how many state legislatures did they gain in the last election? It was at least 6, might have been up to 10. Trying to forget I'm forgetting the I am also trying to forget it, but I am forgetting a bit of the like more specifics of that.
Yeah, according to Ballotpedia, 61 chambers are controlled by Republicans and 37 are controlled by Democrats after the November election.
Yeah, it's bad, and that's where gerrymandering is going to happen. Fake baby Jimmy Dore talking about Medicare for all in the same breath as ivermectin sets off my COINTELPRO brain worms.
Yeah, fair.
Fierce, yeah.
I mean, I don't actually think so, but I
it's not a bad question.
Well, like LBJ saying "make the son of a bitch deny it." Like, I think that is so egregious, and like, I mean, honestly, man.
Yeah. Rob from Dedham, Jimmy Dore, basically, don't ask your doctor what's best for you.Ell your doctor what you want them to prescribe. Demand ivermectin from your doctor today. Also available over the counter at your local livestock feed store. Jammer Sammy. This spate of anti-intellectualism is now moving towards the death of expertise, which satisfies the rebellious reactionaries and makes the Wild West aspect of libertarianism seem less jarring by comparison. That's a good point. If I already can't trust any authority, why not get rid of them all? Big businesses love when public sentiment turns against regulators. Thoughtful comment, Gemmer Sammy. Nug Wrangler, Prager you, I hardly know her, you Monka S. I have no idea. Bullprog, Medicare for all was an inside job. The Tim Caucus. There's a lot more swearing now that Sam has been deposed, and I am here for it. I know, that's my issue. I have an issue with the F-bombs.
So do I.
Always have.
Left Leckening. Maybe Jimmy taking ivermectin will help deal with the worms in his brain. Could help. Nerd Cheetah, you're right. Sociopathic Prater are down with lumping all those other groups into the libs. Well, that's more of someone else. But yes. Emma's Pirate Impressions. Would this statement from Prager leave him open for a lawsuit from families who lose someone to taking ivermectin? Well, he's saying ask your doctor about it. So... And if your doctor says no, get another doctor. So maybe he's like created at least a second of separation for himself.
I just think like the second that we expand liability It's Peter Thiel's going to use it to bankroll a whole bunch of lawsuits and destroy all of progressive
Are
unions.
you making an anti-tort point in Sam's absence?
No, torts are good, but because that's not about speech.
No, I know.
But speech liability is a different thing. Even though I think like full understanding that these people are killing their audiences should be arrived at and elaborated.
Yeah.
I think like that's that's as far as I want to go.
Obamagate hotel plumber. Can we finally dispense with the idea that it's only MAGA morons and hypothetical poor people who can't have a day off of work to deal with vaccine side effects who are refusing vaccination? NYC employees are among the least vaccinated groups in the city. The cops are the worst, but not the only ones. The common thread is personal entitlement. And then you sent a Gothamist article. I agree. It's tricky to talk about that in some ways. I don't think that that's been the focus, at least of my commentary. But I mean, like, that group is the one radicalized by specific Republican misinformation in that area, where the Democrats are doing what they can to encourage vaccinations. Go on.
I mean, yeah, I think that I think the like you have to if you're not doing as much as possible, because the way this stuff, it's all social, right? If you live in a place where nobody around you is getting vaccinated, even in a little like community or whatever, like it's really easy not to do it. And I think I'm for mandates, and I also think you do need to make it easier for people to get it. And I think that is I don't know, like I haven't read this Gothamist piece. But I think like I don't mind a teachers unions mandating their teachers get vax. I think they should do that. I think any union should mandate the vax, and if you don't want to get vaccinated to protect your fellow workers, then you figure out something else. But I think like ultimately I'm for those sorts of mandates. But I also think in the context of America, that does not make it easy for people to talk to their doctor or, you know, miss a few days because you get symptoms. Because like even for me, it's like, okay, when am I going to take this vaccine? I'm going to try to schedule on a day where it's not going to completely ruin like my functionality and stuff. Like it's a hurdle, and you have to make it as easy as possible, and we aren't.
Right. All right, let's take another call. This might be the second to last call. Calling from a 352 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 352.
Oh, hey. Yes. Hey, Emma. I'm having trouble with my phone here.
It sounds okay. Who is this?
This is Keister calling from Florida.
Keister from Florida?
Yeah. Tim Tebow, what a douchebag. Not supporting paying players. I completely agree with you. One thing I do disagree with you is your assessment of his skills. You know, as a graduate from the University of Florida, I watched him play pretty much every down, and he truly was majestic. You know, things that don't show up on the stats. You know,
I'm not a stat girl in the sense that I'm like
majestic in college mainly.
Like, yeah, this is in college. You know,
look, I was a Gator fan. I liked Chris Leak, right? Was the quarterback before Tebow? But I mean, and I remember him being good, but like, you know, I mean.
But at the same point, like, finish your point, and I'll respond.
My point is that people like to say, oh, well, he had Percy Harvin and Hernandez and all of this.
And the Pouncey brothers on his offensive line.
Yeah, but you have to realize that Harvin was out more games than he played, you know, because he suffered from migraines. Hernandez was always in trouble, so he was suspended for half the games.
Mm-hmm.
And, the Pouncey brothers, I'll give you that. The Pouncey brothers were awesome, but it did take, you know, a solid 2 years for them to come into true form.
So it's not Right. But these are just stars we're talking about on that team. The team was also loaded with NFL players that went on to play in the NFL, which is not what can be said for most of the competition they played. And the college scheme that he played, I challenge you to find like pro style throws that he made during that time. And I wasn't, watching as much. I saw what he did in the pros. He can't throw the ball, man. Like he can't, Keister. His motion is
I'm not arguing. I'm not arguing that, and I'm not arguing that he didn't have a bunch of pro players on his team. I'm just saying that without Tebow, we wouldn't have been a winning team. Urban's a terrible coach.
Yeah, that's true.
Just the little things that he did, just amazing things. Small, you would have to watch, literally every offensive play to realize what I'm trying to say. And that's all I'm going to say about Tebow. Matt, I have a suggestion for you in Left for Reckoning, you and David. Mm-hmm. And this may seem far out there, and there's absolutely no comparison between you and Jimmy Dore. So don't take this the wrong way. All I'm trying to say is that there's a huge vacuum now on TYT for a leftist program. Now that, Dore's gone crazy and there's no more aggressive progressives. Maybe through Emma, you can get in contact with TYT and possibly Left Reckoning could become that true socialist voice, that's needed on TYT. And, Anna's doing a great job in turning to, socialism. And even Cenk is blaming capitalism for a lot of the problems that we're seeing these days. But a show like Left Reckoning would counterbalance what we all generally think of TYT. I don't know. I'm just going to throw that out there for you.
I appreciate the sentiment. I'll get in touch with Cenk and say I want to start my own show called the Passive Aggressive Progressive, where I just shit on other progressives and how they're actually the ones that are in front of me and Medicare for All. I thank you for the suggestion.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, Keister. Have a good one, man.
All right, take care. Take care.
Later, bye. Piglet needs a Sasquatch track. Normalize MR talking about sports. You're getting into important demographic by talking about sports and bringing interest of sports fans.
We have a sports clip, actually.
Oh.
Charlie Kirk.
Oh, right. I forgot. Just the mere mention of him does not, I think of a polar opposite of, my...
Yeah, no, I'm trying to remember how to set this clip up because, Bradley, maybe you can help us out because I remember his metaphor, but I can't for the life of me remember what that metaphor was pointing to.
Well, Matt literally said, I was like, let me watch this before the show to prep, and Matt goes, no, we want you to watch it in real time. So I can't even help and set this up.
So Charlie Kirk is referring to the former Chicago Cub Moises Alou in terms of his batting stance. And he's also, I guess, referring to the batting stance being kind of a defensive crouch that Jen Psaki and others are now taking in regards to
what Cubs do.
Right, in Afghanistan and other things, I believe, and he's
a forced metaphor, I think. But
yes, and in this instance, he is desperately trying to help his producers find a photo of the stance.
He wants to see this guy's butt.
Let's try to figure out his metaphor for how Jen Psaki is like Moises Alou's batting stance.
So to retrain a batter like Moises Alou, who always had a really weird stance.
Can we get more volume at all, or is that it?
It would be very hard. He's only used to that. The same is true for Jen Psaki and John Kirby. So Jen Psaki has to get in front of the country, and all of a sudden, she has no one left to blame. You see, John Kirby, he can't blame the Oath Keepers on the withdrawal of Bagram Air Base. You see, Joe Biden can't blame white supremacy for the fact that the Taliban took over. He can't blame anti-vaxxers, insurrectionists, white supremacists. There's nowhere left to hide. That's not a good picture. No. I'll get a different one of Moise Salou's batting stance. Anyway, he had a very particular batting stance. No. I'll get the later Moise Salou. Okay, anyway. And that's his dad. I think his Moise Salou's father also played in the majors too. Didn't he?
That's true.
I was a huge baseball fan before they decided that they hated the country.
Oh, right.
All right. As they're looking it up. There it is right there. See? Nothing like your 10-year-old memory. That's it. Weird up and down bat. Yes, that's exactly right. You see how that is not how you hold a bat, everybody, with the elbows extended like that. That is a strange batting stance. Do you agree? That is a weird. Put that on the main screen for everyone to see. So what does Moise Salou, who urinated on his hands, and Jen Psaki have in common? More than you might think, actually. Well, Moise Salou and Jen Psaki both had a certain way of holding the bat or answering questions. And Jen Psaki, she doesn't know how to answer a question where she can't blame anti-vaxxers, oath keepers, insurrectionists, white supremacists, flyover country.
But what?
So like Moise Salou likes to hold a bat, Jen Psaki likes to field questions.
It's not like such a tortured metaphor, but I've never seen him smile so widely, which was also pretty disturbing.
And like, it would make a bit more sense if Alou was like somebody that flamed out of the league. He's trying to make a critique of Jen Psaki's position, which would mean that Alou's stance could not have success.
Yeah, Moise Salou won the most valuable player in a World Series.
So
he's like a legendary, amazing baseball player.
Right, the point is just like, so you're comparing her to one of the most successful baseball players of all time to critique her? Like, it sounds like you're kind of thirsting for a sake bomb.
And just to speak to what his critique is, which is like when the Democrats are in power, they have nowhere to hide. That's actually the most unimpeachable reason to vote for Democrats and to have them in power over the Republican Party, because that's all they do when, they can fundraise off of kids in cages and wear a kente cloth and say they're against the police and or against police brutality or whatever. When they're out of power, they can just go off for political propaganda content. When they're in power, you actually see where the rubber hits the road, and it's much more useful, in my opinion, from a political education standpoint. So from that perspective, I agree with Charlie, but I don't quite think I want to compare Jen Psaki, who I'll just say I do not like. I think any press secretary is going to be basically the most empowered liar in the country.
Yeah, don't normalize not liking presidents, press secretaries.
Yeah, exactly. But like Moise Salou has this weird batting stance that was extremely effective for him. Jen Psaki, like, unbelievable. I mean, talk about a bad sports metaphor. I just love that.
Yeah. I also just love imagining Charlie Kirk's producers finding photos of Felipe Alou, like in black and white, thinking this is the right guy.
Oh, dude, we knew he was old, but we didn't know he was that old.
And the funny thing about that Alou batting stance is it doesn't look that weird in photos. Like, it looks weirder when he's in video, when he's, he kind of points the bat straight up in the air as opposed to like over his shoulder and stuff like that. Anyway, I mean,
isn't his squatting stance a little odd too?
It's a little bit, back on its haunches.
Right.
I think, oh man, I don't know where to, like, I just love the idea that Charlie Kirk, and I encourage more conservative propagandists to follow his route of saying, yeah, I'm just done with sports. Sports are bad and too woke. Because if you will cede that territory to us, I think we can do a lot with it.
Oh, I certainly do. I mean, that would be great, right? To have them completely disengage from even the more conservative sports. Like, baseball as an organization is pretty conservative, but I want, conservative pundits completely disengage with football, for example, and just let it be something leftists engage with, and then we can have critiques about player safety and player pay and how these billionaires hoard way too much of their wealth when they own their teams, and it needs to go more towards these players who have short-term careers. And then we can have a conversation about college football. Cede that territory to us entirely. Talk about labor rights in college football, how the players need to be fairly compensated or compensated at all. Then we can have that conversation. But like, we actually may not even need them to have a mass exodus from sports commentary if you like the Charlie Kirk sticks to metaphors like that. One that doesn't make any sense at all. All right, we're gonna take one more call, read some IMs, and we may actually get out of here a little early because I got a sad thing to do today. I'm gonna leave a little early. My family's selling my childhood home of 20 years, so I'm gonna go say goodbye to it. I don't know. Should I even say that? But I feel like it's a little emotional. It's a little sad.
Very sad.
It's a little sad, yeah. So I'm gonna go and, you know, maybe just sit in the backyard with my mom, have a glass of wine or something like that. So I've been like a little bummed out about it, but it's not a bad problem to have if that's my big problem of the week. All right, this will be the final IM of the day. I mean, call. Calling from a 646 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Who's this?
Oh, hi, this is Ralph, aka Omega Center on Dragon from the chat. Just wanted to say hi to you guys. First of all, one point, Charlie Kirk looks like a Rob Liefeld drawing, if you guys are familiar with comics and art styles and stuff like that.
Sorry, can you say it again?
The guy just looks like a Rob Liefeld drawing when they have their really scrunched up face trying to look all tough and imposing, but they look so, everything is too centered in the middle, and you're like, I can't take this guy serious. My other thing is, I want to bring attention to like how East River Park here in New York City, along, you know, basically on the very east side of Manhattan, is probably getting demolished, and the fact that de Blasio kind of leapfrogged over people in order to like get that demolished, and the city council, Carlina Rivera, did jack shit about it. And yeah, honestly, it's like one of the worst things ever, because the fact that a lot of people used to come out there before quarantine to celebrate July 4th and all that stuff, because that's where they would go see the fireworks. I'll go with my family and all that stuff. But yeah, it's kind of, you know, you were talking about your childhood home being demolished. Well, there's probably a lot of people's childhood, a childhood haunt for people to, like, you know, have barbecues and whatnot, and it's going to go away. And then it leaves the door wide open for gentrification, because developers get it, then they hire companies, then they get people to build, like, you know, luxury condos and all this other stuff over there, because that's what we need, as if we don't have like one across the river that's like super imposing. It looks like a giant goddamn arc in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
But you know,
well, it's not being demolished, I'll say that, and it's I do not.
I mean, it's having construction done on it that basically will kind of destroy like the current version of the park.
Oh, okay, yes, understood. I really thank you for calling in. I appreciate it.
See you guys, and you have a good one, especially you, Emma. I can feel for you on that.
Oh, no, don't worry. It's really not a big deal. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Later, guys.
Bye. Clower says, I feel you. My siblings just sold my parents' house last month. I'd lived there for years. The new owners are demolishing it. It's sad. Yeah. Jonathan Armstead, batting stances are encouraged to help you compensate for the thing you do worse, like holding the bat higher to reach pitches. Or for Charlie, he could stop pretending he's in college and forget about Turning Point USA.
Sorry, what was that last part?
Or for Charlie, he could stop pretending he's in college and forget about Turning Point USA.
That's the thing about Charlie, is he could have went to college, had the opportunity to, and was convinced by, I think, Foster Freeze, or maybe it was the guy who died from COVID, to become a fascist propagandist instead, and that's where he's at.
Right. Travis from Pittsburgh. Moises Alou hitting sake bombs. That's pretty funny. TLL. Charlie is so unaware. He thinks it's an own on everybody with an earshot to say pterodactyl. What did he say?
Because he says Pasaki instead of Saki.
Oh, oh, got it there. Got it. Ryan Cole, the only sports ball game I ever watched in 10 years was when I was recovering from septicemia in the hospital. My roommate watched the game, and the sports ball guy, talking guys, kept praising Tebow while he lost badly. Yeah, there's a cult of personality around Tim Tebow that is really weird. And honestly, I think he's going to run for office at some point, which would be vindication for shitting on him all the time. He's like this evangelical Christian type who has this significant appeal in SEC country, northern Florida in general, Alabama, Mississippi, etc., just because he was like, he wrote John 3:14 on his eye black, very performative in his Christianity, talked about being a virgin for quite a while, but he kept failing upwards and getting all these opportunities to...
He's the reverse Kaepernick.
Right. He was awful for quite a while, but like, he's not that good of an athlete, even though he tries to be. He's a terrible thrower of the football and insisted on playing quarterback. And the hype around him from a right-wing Christian evangelical base, like, really tore locker rooms apart in the NFL. He was on the Broncos. He won a playoff game there. He made like one good throw, and then that made people lose their minds. He eventually was out of the NFL. They tried to convert him to tight end. He played in the Mets minor leagues for a while, wasn't successful there. Kept getting opportunity after opportunity, like, for no reason. Opportunities that people who were black specifically or Hispanic or whatever the case may be would never have gotten. And there was players had resentment towards him for that reason. And the Jaguars, at age, 34 is he now, signed him to play tight end. You can look up the videos. It was quite embarrassing. He was not good, and he got cut, thankfully. But it was his college coach that signed him too. So he's like the most undeserving and privileged guy who has this built-in hype machine behind him that would be useful in some sort of run. So I saw some tweet after he was cut by the Jaguars, like, somebody sign him to a professional team so we can eventually stave off this religious fanatics run for office.
Yeah, somebody who's a Jets and a Mets fan and had the fact that he's played for two of my favorite teams in two separate sports leagues, I really resent Tim Tebow.
Yeah, he's easy to resent. And it's just one of the most bizarre phenomenons I've ever seen in my life. Somebody who's just not talented, but everyone thinks he's a god.
Well, it's just so clear what it is and why he's given those opportunities. And like I said, it's the exact reason Kaepernick's not, because people like what he's saying.
Cat lady, please stop talking about sports. No. Rob from Dedham, there's no way Charlie Kirk ever played baseball. They don't make helmets big enough for his head. Yes, that would apply to a variety of sports. You guys want to do one more clip, a few more IMs, and then we'll head out? Like, I don't need to leave. Yeah, just a couple more IMs. Okay. See, it's not just me that's, like, we got things to do.
Left Reckoning tonight.
Left Reckoning tonight, so come on. While Sam's away, we will.
That's the way the mice will play.
You're the mice. I didn't really want to characterize us as mice.
That's fair.
I was thinking that Robin Hood cartoon in the church.
Not like in the Cinderella cartoon?
I don't remember that one as well.
Well, that's because we're gendered. Congressional, although I really didn't like those princess movies, but that's a story for another day. Sam Sabbatical, something Johnny Manziel. Yeah, that's another example. Although Manziel had significantly more talent.
Manziel was wronged by the college football cartel, taking all of his money that he earned for them, and when he was never going to be a pro, but he was a fun guy to watch in college, and he should have benefited monetarily from it.
People don't understand, like, the shift, the enormous increase in speed and physicality that it takes once you leave college and go to the NFL, and how much faster and like thumping-er it is. And Manziel was quick for college, but Manziel's not quick for the NFL. Like, you see guys like Lamar Jackson That's quick for the NFL. Kyler Murray. That's quick for the NFL. So, you know, there's just... Manziel should have made a ton of money in college. He was one of my favorite college players, and I don't really follow college sports that much, but I was obsessed with him at watching his games at Texas A&M. He was really fun. All right, just a few more and then we'll get out of here. Carolina Comrades, CEO's next, LOL, but that'll never happen. I don't know what you mean. Sad Man. Hey, I'm Mark Crew. Just thought I should recommend a documentary series that runs on HBO now about QAnon. It's called Q Into the Storm. It goes deep and shows how messed up and out of control this thing really is. Yes, that was quite good, and I watched it a few months ago. I'd encourage everybody to read it. Have you read my email? Says, here in the Netherlands, you can get vaccinated at universities without an appointment during the first few weeks of school. No mandate, but ample opportunity to get one. Not that it wasn't extremely easy to get one already. Wolfie 59. I'm 17 minutes behind, but I have to say evangelicals don't like Catholicism, so the Pope is bad before he even opens his mouth. Good point. Good point. It was more just in the context of me messing around.
Well, I mean, the Pope is interesting because he does piss off a lot of particularly white Catholics, is my understanding, and the way he's saying to de-emphasize abortion politics, although I don't think he's going to completely change the church's take on that, but and to be less racist, that goes over poorly with certain Catholics. And so there's certain Catholics that think he's basically like an anti-pope or something like that, but they still go to church every Sunday.
Yeah, it's difficult for that to be like one of the driving Catholic ideologies, that he's the Word of God, and then just to choose not to buy into that for one particular reason.
We'll wait for another German one.
Nerd Cheetah, no, door 2. I had been holding on to some final thread of hope for him. Shit. It's got to be a joke. Kid tested, Politburo approved. Dennis Prager, ask your local alchemist about COVID-19. And the final IM of the day. It's always snowy in Ottawa. It's sickening just how accurate the line of analysis regarding Brett Weinstein, anything I say is rational as long as I say it calmly with authority, applies to Tony Blair and all the architects of the Afghanistan-Iraq occupations. Good point.
Yeah, hysterical men speaking calmly, whether it's Brett Weinstein saying Antifa race war is imminent because he talked to Andy Ngo, or if it's Sam Harris saying, every Muslim is going to attack you because of the Quran. It's if you say it in a voice that's calm enough, people, particularly white men, will think that they're getting a dose of rationality when really they're getting a dose of fear.
Yeah. The IM continues in quotes, I'm calm, I'm British, and we need to kill thousands more to cover the corpse pile with fresh people, else the pile will begin to... should I do it in the accent? I'm calm, I'm British, and we need to kill thousands more to cover the corpse pile with fresh people, else the pile will begin to smell and I might get chastised at the country club for my odor of death.
Literally
thousands more dead, so that my stench is not obvious to the people down at the country club. Cheerio. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Really appreciate it. Fun show today. Thanks, guys. Bradley and Matt. I don't know if I'm qualified to say good job to you since we're all in the same boat. Oh, well, I'll take that. And everybody, awesome show today. Thanks for contributing and writing in and being great. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my